don't California my Texas.
Right.
You're not trying to do that because California has done that.
Texans are trying to California Texas.
Yes, thank you. Have you said that before publicly?
No, but feel free to.
Yes, I think that's true. I think that I agree with that 100%. As a Californian who doesn't agree with a lot of the policies of California and New York City, I think Texans are becoming more like that on their own. Welcome back to the show, Ryan Pazicki, urbanist writer. That's what we're going to call you for this. And I wanted to talk to you about Austin, about New York City, about Chicago, about San Francisco, about big cities, urban cities, everything in between. To get us started, you and I are both transplants to Texas. We're sitting in my gorgeous palace in Maynard, Texas, Manor for the rest of the world, Texas, right outside of Austin. And, but you and I'm from California. I'm from the Bay Area. I've lived in Orange County, lived in Denver, and now I live here. You've lived in New York City, and you've lived in San Francisco, and you've lived here, Austin, and elsewhere, right?
Yep.
But I think those two, you and I both came here during the flood of Californians and New Yorkers moving.
Part of the exodus, yeah.
The exodus to that. So there's a lot of talk about in Texas about don't California my Texas, which I'd like to talk a little bit about because I think that's an interesting, I understand where they're coming from. But I wanted to think bigger to start. I wanted to dream for a minute to get us started with this. Just kind of think about how can we make Austin the greatest city? Like if we had all the, there's a movie Megalopolis coming out where I don't know what's going on. Francis Ford Coppola's something, but it's like this idea of like an architect who I guess he has a ruler. He just changes things and he has magical powers. But if we had like complete godlike power and vision, I don't think anybody should have this for the record, but just for fun, dreaming, what do you think Austin could look like to make it better than New York City, LA in the future, Tomorrowland?
Yeah.
What would it be?
Well, first, thanks for having me back. And I'm happy to be here to talk about all this stuff with you. Yeah, I think not giving anybody the magic wand would be the first thing, but
destroy my dream right at the beginning to say forget. Well, this is the Troubadour show. It's about romanticism. So I just want to dream for
But I
a
think,
minute.
so to answer the question, you kind of have to think about like, why do cities exist in the first place? And, the main reason is that they bring people together for commerce, for romance, for knowledge, just for human connection. And that leads to the creation of businesses, leads to the creation of universities, to arts, theater, and then all of the attendant things that come with that people want, like restaurants, places to live, culture. So if we want to think about like the city or any city just in terms of like the basic core function, it is a place for bringing people together. Mm-hmm. So viewed from that angle, what would make Austin the greatest city? Well, it would be the city that provides the most opportunities for people to connect. So in all of these various spheres that I just mentioned. So places to work, places to learn, and we have a new university coming in Austin, which is hopefully going to be another draw for more people to come here.
Yeah. 2 universities.
Well, we have the big one, and then we have a bunch of small ones, and then just, university.
UATX?
Yeah, as the sort of whole cloth new thing that's being created here.
Well, I'll say that because we've announced this publicly, but we're building a museum, ARI's building a museum and a university.
So that will add to the cultural.
Coming. Plug that and pay attention.
To the extent that people want to be here, companies want to be here as well. They want a highly educated workforce, which Austin provides. Yeah. So like those are kind of the strengths of the city, I would say. It is a place people already want to be. It has a highly educated population and workforce that wants good jobs, that wants culture. And so basically, how do you keep building on that? Literally.
Yeah.
And that's
like actually you have to build something. You can't just do it with what you have now to some degree.
And that is sort of the problem with Austin to date, is that it has grown laterally, not vertically. So horizontally.
Well, you see that as a problem.
Well, I think when you have a kind of spatial relationship with land in which people are very far apart from each other, it actually makes it very difficult for these connections to happen.
Yeah, so I agree with all that actually. I mean, I'm all for vertical and all of that, But okay, but just for a couple minutes though. So that's a really good groundwork, is like reminding ourselves the purpose of why we care about cities or where I mean, versus being a hermit living in, out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
That is an option.
And some people do want that.
Yeah, some people want that. And that's why some people move to Texas. Like if
you want a ranch, this is a great
This is a great state for that, exactly. And there's a lot of places in America. I mean, people
Colorado,
constantly underestimate how big America is.
Yeah, it's huge.
And there's just a lot of just areas you can find that dream home. I mean, I know I was talking to some people the other day who, well, actually a couple months ago, but like he's somebody I was working with, and he, built this house outside of like Tennessee, or like outside of a major city in Tennessee. It's like an hour away or something.
Okay.
But there's just like, there's so many options. If you want that, you could still have the civilization aspect within reach. And, but you could build like a huge house. That's your dream house. And I think that's great. That's what's cool about American movies. You have that option. But yeah, you're right. So whether it's suburbia, which you've written a lot about lately on your Substack, and I want to talk about that because I'm from suburbia. I live in suburbia.
I mean, I grew up in suburbia as well.
Yeah, you grew up in
suburbia.
But
outside of a very old town.
So. Okay. And well, that's interesting. And then, the purpose of cities is to, there's the vibrancy, there's the connection, there's the Broadway, like arts.
Yeah.
It's really hard to have a really robust art scene if there's like a population of 10,000.
Right.
You need millions of people to make that happen, to make a high level, the greatest in the world.
I mean, smaller towns certainly have, like the community theater and things like that.
Oh, for sure. And there's a lot of, I just joined the board of Austin Shakespeare.
Right. Yeah. Congratulations.
And I think that, so I wanted to talk about that, about like bringing arts, but that's my kind of, what I want to talk about with, in terms of vision is, like obviously it's not going to look like what we're saying.
Right.
But just if there were no roadblocks, if we could just build what we wanted to, you, me, other people, this is part of what it means to be a city, is like you're dealing with a multitude of visions for what you like. Public transit. I want a motorcycle again. I want I love my car. I want to, be on my schedule when I want, like at my speeds. When I, if I want to go 2 a.m., I don't want to have to worry about going at 2:15. I want to go at 2 a.m., like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of, that's what I'm thinking of, is like, how do you optimize for that? And like, what could be a dream big scenario for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a city, it's not a ranch though. So like, if you try to optimize for both, then you kind of get something that looks like, outer Austin, where it's huge plots of land with, houses plopped in the middle of it that are only accessible by, car. That's not really an urban environment. So,
I see. Okay.
So, the modern post-war kind of car-centric suburb is not really, it's a departure from the historical urban form.
Yeah.
Which was closer knit, connected by transit, recognizably urban, even if it wasn't, tall or something. So urban doesn't mean tall,
Yeah, it doesn't have to, right. But it does have to mean concentrated.
Yeah,
like within a geographic, like San Francisco's not that tall.
No, it's not. I mean, most of it is very low rise. I mean, that's part of why it's so expensive.
Because they don't have enough skyscrapers.
Because they need to build more.
Yeah, they need skyscrapers because they need limited geography.
Or just larger scale housing. But
sure,
nobody wants to bulldoze a Victorian, mansion.
I'll do it. Hire Kurt, maybe.
I mean, probably many people do want to, but it's not allowed in most of the cities. So,
but we don't have restrictions right now. You're the character from Megalopolis. So, what do you want?
Well,
for Ryan Pazicki?
What I would like to do is to remove all of the restrictions that make Austin from really owning that kind of urbanity.
Okay.
And so, like, the two major issues there are that, it's all about land use, really, but with respect to the types of housing that are allowed to be built and the types of, I guess, road infrastructure that we have here. And so the city is too car-oriented, even in...
All right. So your vision, so fine, that your vision is a less car oriented.
Right.
Austin.
It's not anti-car.
Yes.
By any means.
I'm trying to give you that point.
But
so you want it to have
we shouldn't be building our neighborhoods around
in
the
Austin
car
specifically, like
well, in it, I think in any city that is trying to be a city, like.
Well, so what would you have it? How would you have it start moving? Like again, you have supreme magical powers.
Right.
So I just want to see the vision. as clearly as possible.
Well, yeah. So I know what I'm trying to get at here is that there's an incrementalism to all of this. Like,
Yeah.
The magic wand is not a bulldozer. Like, what it does is erase sort of, I would say, regulations that are getting in the way of the city that we might be.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean that, okay, well, we've allowed for, we've gotten rid of zoning. That doesn't mean that overnight it turns into, something that looks like New York. I don't think Austin will ever look like New York.
You don't think that's at all possible?
It's
like in the fantasy.
Again, like if you can, New York is an island, or basically a series of islands with a bit on the mainland.
There's unique aspects.
There are unique aspects that kind of force things up, and there isn't that real pressure here. Unless the Texas legislature were to say we're casting a green belt around the hill country to prevent growth.
They probably would.
I don't I don't know that would be popular.
Oh, okay, good.
But that would be the only kind of forcing mechanism.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's kind of no end to how far out you can go.
Well, like my
especially
city's
in a state like Texas, which is enormous,
so huge.
And
like my city's a great example.
Right.
Like Maynard, like you drove in. I have a road now. Did
right.
you see that road?
I did.
It's a nice road. I was like, yes,
it's nicely paved.
It's nicely paved.
It's too big.
It's too big.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think they're expecting a lot of growth.
Yeah.
In the future,
a certain type of growth, a kind of growth that's only accessible by car, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, because that's the reality of what Texas is, I think. Right now and in the near future, right?
But so if there are choices there are policy choices there.
So you think they could make a choice that would have like a tram, so they have smaller roads and have some kind of tram from Maynard to downtown Austin or something?
I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but in the state, the vast majority of the Department of Transportation, quote unquote, something like 97%. I forget the exact figure, but the vast majority of it is spent on building roads, not on any other kind of transportation. So
yes, yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. So they're making policy decisions,
right?
Obviously, right away.
Right,
and they're saying it's all about cars because it is all about cars.
Right. I mean, the marketplace isn't building roads. The government is. So to be clear.
Yeah. So like they could be building other things like
right. But if you look at you look at Austin, look at a lot of the old towns in Texas and the shape of their downtowns. Maynard included, there's a little vestige of what Maynard was before the car was dominant.
In the downtown area?
Right, on I think Parsons and Lexington.
Yeah.
There's like an old building there right on the corner. It's like one of the last standing, but it comes right up to the road. It looks like it's maybe from the late 1800s. Mm-hmm. There used to be probably a little downtown there that served what was, I'm going to guess, a largely farming community around here. And, basically kind of farm town model. The farmers would ride their, I don't know, maybe horse and buggy and then Model T, into downtown, when they...
Cars, basically.
With transportation, but... Yeah.
But I mean, don't you think there's a... Okay, well...
There's a difference between the Model T versus, say, a Ford F-150, well, insofar as cars go. So one is gigantic.
You mean fundamentally?
No, I mean just like size-wise,
So the size of the F-150.
Right. So if we're designing, roads to fit those, we're going to have to, it just takes up a tremendous amount of space.
Takes more and more space. Yeah.
And so, if they wanted that big road to go into downtown Maynard, well, they would have had to basically bulldoze the whole thing and
start over.
But that is what we did in the middle of the 20th century in most of our cities in America. We built giant roads into them and made them places that nobody wanted to go anymore. So,
interesting. Okay, so
because we built them around the car rather than around the people inside the car.
Okay, but I'm still trying to get an idea of what you think that would look like, I guess. So like, yeah, I get what you're saying is this, and I want to talk more in detail about what, because you wrote a lot in your Substack about the history, which I found really interesting, like how there were certain policies that favored the car. And I want to talk about that because I have my views on why that happened. I think you have yours. I'd like to dig into it, but I still am just curious about, like, Austin is an interesting place. So we have all these big tech companies moving here. X is now going to move here. That's Twitter. And that's, obviously Elon Musk has moved a lot of stuff. And just like an hour north of us in Temple, I think, right? Is it Temple, Texas? What's it called? The city that...
Oh, Taylor?
No,
Where's
it's.
Samsung?
I think it's like they're building a huge Facebook data center.
Yeah, I forgot.
Like it's like an hour north, but they're building a whole bunch of stuff in this whole
Yeah.
region. I think in San Marcos, south of us. I mean, the whole belt from Austin to San Antonio is
Yeah.
massive, and that's a huge problem because that's where I would think I would 100% agree with you. Like my vision would be like a super train or like, as fast as humanly possible, right? Like I want that to be a 10, 15 minute ride. It really shouldn't be that long. It's only 50 miles or something like that. It's 55 miles, right? It's like just right into downtown Austin. And then if we had this driverless car thing happening, just rent a driverless car.
That would help.
Get wherever you want, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Or like I could see that as a really cool, like you having this super city that, San Antonio, Austin.
Sort of like the Metroplex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that it's kind of, because that would unite so much of us that we would then, when I'm thinking about, for me, my passion, the arts and theater. Well, now we can have a big Austin, San Antonio theater Metroplex here that someone in San Antonio could be here in 10, 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And then boom, you have a whole expansion and an ability to raise money to, you just have a whole market that's like, what do we have in this area now? 4 million, 5 million people in this whole metro, 6, 7, like
in the Austin metro, it's about 2.5 million.
San Antonio.
Austin, yeah.
If you combine those,
more,
so that would be my kind of vision, is like having all of that connected. And that's where I agree with the transportation part.
Yeah.
And I would still want the car to be an option.
No, I mean, it has to be like, roads so transit or transportation in general are means of connection, right?
Yeah. So you don't want to cut one off arbitrarily.
Right.
Like Kirk wants to get here at 3 a.m. and the road, everything's shut off at 3 a.m.
The benefit of
I gotta
something.
get to Ryan and Dorian at 3 a.m. Man.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm going to talk about Poppins. I read your Poppin article. So I'm like, are you sure? You're going to be like, instead of Newman, you're going to be like, Kirk. I'm going to be your Newman.
That the whole point of that article was to ask a question, not necessarily.
That's too bad, man. You said, no, I have you quoted at the end.
That's fine.
Who wants to do a Poppin?
Yeah.
I'm going to do a Poppin.
Good. I look forward to it.
Damn it. What did I do? Why did I do this?
Remember, the other side of the pop-in is the pop-out. So.
Yeah, I know. No, you have to know when you're not wanted and how long you're going to stay.
Yeah, anyway. Neither here nor there.
Well, I want to talk about the pop-in later. But
I mean, I think just given the way that this area has grown and the fact that it has grown with the automobile, it's just like, transit is only going to work in limited parts of it. Like transit requires a certain amount of density to work, and when you've built large single-family neighborhoods on, an acre of land, there just by definition is not going to be enough people there to make transit work. So those places will probably, for the foreseeable future, remain car only.
Yeah.
But what I guess, I didn't mean to stop the conversation at Manor, but the street grid of Austin was laid out in 1839, and for a time when there
were no cars.
There were no cars. It was people traveling by foot or by horse or something like that.
Yeah.
But that's where people lived too. It was a lived-in city in its early years, and it wasn't until much later that people sort of decamped from downtown into the surrounding areas, and you can sort of see where in Austin the street grids end and turn into these kind of curvaceous roads. But Hyde Park follows a street grid, but it was connected to downtown by a streetcar. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Hyde Park in Austin is a streetcar
suburb. Do you
suburb.
see remnants of it?
Well,
obviously
all
the structure,
the tracks have been
there's no remnants.
But Hyde Park has
just the way it's
a fairly rectilinear street grid.
Sure. Yeah.
For the most part, there are some exceptions, and you see that somewhat to the south of downtown, and then where I live in East Austin also follows that. Basically until Airport Boulevard, and then it kind of starts to look more suburban after that.
Okay.
But so I would, where I live, it's a single family neighborhood, but it's like right next to downtown Austin. It has an urban form. You can walk around, the blocks are not large.
Yes.
There are places to walk to that are not just other people's homes, restaurants, bars, coffee shops, schools, all sorts of things like that. And, my vision is not like flying cars and, and stuff like that.
It's not your vision.
It's not it's the opposite of the Jetsons. It's being on Earth, and
Okay.
people being able to walk around everywhere in their neighborhood to the, most of the places they would want to go.
Yeah.
And then the car becomes a means of accessing other parts of town rather than the car being required to do everything.
Yeah.
So, like, if I want to go grocery shopping, like in person, instead of having Amazon deliver, I have to drive to the grocery store. It's too far to walk and then to,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well,
If I want to go to the gym, ironically, I have to drive to it because there isn't one close to where I live.
Run to it.
Right. But, if the going to
kidding,
the
I
gym
would
takes
do
3
that.
hours out of your day, then it
Yeah,
becomes
yeah.
impractical to do.
No, I mean, I've told you this before. One of the main reasons I bought this house
Yeah.
was because in my price range, this is a 4-bedroom, three bath
Right.
with a big garage, and I built a gym. And that was one of my biggest things that I wanted to do, is have my own gym, because that cuts out so much
Yeah.
time. Now, of course, I miss the gym now. I
Right.
miss other people. So that's the flip side of it, is I'm like, dang, I want to, where are all the people? Where's my motivation to
Yeah.
get a big pump?
Well, that is an optimization question. And I think, with my series on the suburbs, I started with the cultural reasons behind it rather than the transportation or, government largesse that kind of fueled it. Like, I think there is a cultural question behind all of this stuff.
Yes, I agree with
that I think is very important. And I also think it's deeply embedded and is something that urbanists just need to accept, that like there is a suburban preference embedded into, American culture in particular that
Yeah.
favors a certain type
Leave
of
it
development.
to Beaver,
Right.
the 50s.
Well, we've
like,
idealized it and
it.
valorized it as well.
When it goes back farther than that, it goes back to Romanticism, actually. That's what this show I talk a lot
Yeah.
about. But I think Romanticism is the first moment when you have modernity really popping up.
Yeah.
And then you have the backlash, which is an idealization of nature,
Yeah.
of living out in nature, the value of the value of the noble savage, of, Rousseau, the value
Yeah.
of child without the education, like as sons, the civilized, quote unquote, things we do to make people into a quote unquote proper civilized person. And all those kinds of ideas pop up in the mid 1700s. So this goes back hundreds of years.
for sure.
And
And
there's
you
a
can-
lot of literature that's about this kind of idea.
Yeah, I know for sure. And it's embedded in the American founding as well.
Especially the American founding.
Jefferson talks about this, kind of rural idyll. I mean, really, in American culture, there are these two, or at least as far as, the American development goes, you have these kind of two antipodes in Jefferson and Hamilton is kind of the urbanist, and Jefferson as the agrarian.
Yeah. I mean, I knew the Jefferson connection. I guess I didn't think
Yeah.
about Hamilton like
But
that.
he is the,
That makes sense. Yeah, he is. Of course.
the essence of urbanity in that era.
Yeah.
Washington, interestingly, kind of straddles both.
Yeah. He's tall. So
Yes, so he can literally straddle both.
straddle both.
But what did I want to say there? It's
How far back it goes.
right. And so I wrote an essay earlier in the summer called "The Revolt of the Cities," actually for the 4th of July, in which the revolution started in the cities, but then by necessity we had to abandon the cities. I mean, the British, occupied Philadelphia, New York,
Yeah.
Boston, and so we had to abandon the cities and take the war into the countryside, basically,
In order
and
to
that's
win
where
it.
it was mostly fought.
Oh, yeah.
But there was this kind of moralizing aspect to it where thought leaders, religious leaders at the time thought that, this was necessary to forge this new kind of nation, one that would not be city-based. So, but I mean,
So they did it in contrast to, like, as a way to almost propaganda.
right.
To kind of like, this is
right.
how
The
we're
cities
unique.
must be, it wasn't,
America's, go ahead.
yeah, some thought like the cities must be sacrificed for the sake of the new nation. Others thought the cities should be destroyed because they're the center of sin. And that goes back.
That goes back to
That goes back to the Bible,
Yeah,
like Genesis is
Yeah.
largely, a chronicle of how God destroys various cities
That's what
for their
Eden is.
sinfulness.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and so this is a heavy theme in Western civilization, is the, this Athens and Sparta, right?
Mhm.
Even pre-Christian era, you have like the urban Greeks, and they're very cosmopolitan. That's where the term literally comes from.
Right.
And then you have the Spartans, who are rural. Of course, they're slave owners,
Right.
harsh as hell to their slaves, killing helots and the people around them in order to have that structure.
Well, so Hamilton is an Athenian and Jefferson is perhaps a Spartan in this regard.
Yeah, in certain senses. But I think to me, the issue is there are these two fundamental deep values, and there's going to be a person who's probably more urban or suburban, which is to me related. It's just a different version of urban versus the rural. I think is the unique. Those two are the two fundamentals, not suburban and urban. Because suburban's trying to have a little bit of what urban
it's trying
has.
to split the difference.
Yeah, trying to split the difference and have it like I want my own space, but I also want the coffee shop next door that's vibrant and I can see some beautiful people walking around. But that's hard to do because they all want to be downtown Austin. I get that. I understand where it's my Starbucks in Maine, or no offense, you're not finding all the kind of diversity of individuals there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're right. Like suburban, like there always was a connection there. Like the earliest suburbs were, they were on the fringes of the city, but they were still part of the city. So there was a very tight relationship. And that was understood as the suburbs kind of developed in the late 1800s with the advancement of various types of technology, from the horse-drawn omnibus to the streetcar, which was the electric trolley system. And, they were seen as extensions of the city. I mean, most of Manhattan is technically a suburb of downtown Manhattan. It's obviously grown, tremendously over time, but it was
like the Leonardo DiCaprio movie.
Right, but the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side were connected by these early forms of transit that enabled people to live in the country,
Yeah.
When Hamilton was Secretary of the Treasury under the, Washington's administration, the first capital was downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And all of uptown Manhattan was just countryside. It was undeveloped.
Well, it's like that movie, The Gangs of New York.
Yeah.
Ever seen the end of that? Where it shows the progress of New York,
that's
over
right.
their graves.
Yeah.
And it's like this little center, and then it grows into modern New York and stuff, which is an interesting, it's nice to see those times. I like seeing Austin pictures from 1930 or something.
Right.
Like that's really interesting.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how it laid out and the kind of vision they had. Anyway, but it's an interesting that there's these two deep cultural values. I don't think I think there's almost a fundamental human thing that's just built not just into it. Like there's an American version of it, but it's built into the West, and it's probably built into a lot of other cultures that are not as familiar with them.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, what do we do about that in our era today? Like I said at the beginning, you and I are from California, New York. We're from these, other more criticized for various reasons, but they're highly developed, very wealthy, very successful, but also very progressive, and sometimes not in the best ways always, sometimes in good ways, not always. And so, a lot of Texans are worried about that as we come here, and here we are, two Californians talking about reshaping all of Austin and Texas. And I'm interested because I think Austin is interesting because it's a blue dot in a red ocean. Right. It has this interesting interplay between I'll call it the rurality of the rest of Texas and the urbanity of Austin. I think Austin definitely wants to be more urban. Like it wants that. Everyone I talk to wants the connection. And I mean the good things about urbanity. Obviously, we should probably express this. What are the negatives that are, I think, genuinely there? And, I think sometimes are a little ridiculous. They're kind of byproducts of racism and other.
Right.
So there's definitely a problem of being actually isolated and the feeling of being isolated despite being surrounded by all these people. I think there's a despair element. Like there's their famous story, which I think is actually misunderstood, of the woman in New York City who was being murdered while people were watching from their apartments. Mm-hmm. And they just didn't do it. Nobody called. And now what they discovered is they didn't call because everyone else thought someone else was doing it. Right. So, but that's the kind of problem, right? Is we don't take responsibility.
Action,
we don't take any kind of responsibility for I don't know Ryan on the street, but I don't want him to die for God. So I'm going to do something about it. It's like, no, we're all selfish. We just care about ourselves. We don't care about anybody else, right? So that's one thing that I think is there. That it's I think the thing that I disagree with and the way that it's toned is the sinfulness aspect. It is sinful if you're coming from, a very puritanical Christian perspective, then yes, it is going to be a hotbed for sex. And this is one of the major sins of like sex outside of marriage.
Yeah.
Versus if you're living in a rural town of 1,000, it's highly unlikely that there's that much. I mean, probably, but maybe not as much because there's not as many options.
You're at once more isolated and yet up in everybody else's business.
Yeah, exactly. You have no privacy as much, and
that is kind of the irony, though, isn't it? Like the desire for privacy was an aspect, or at least the idea that privacy existed out in the suburbs was one of the kind of cultural forces that propelled people
into
outward.
The suburbs.
Right.
Yeah, because there's some truth to that. I mean, I feel pretty private out here.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, and I like.
But I think it's it's not true that you don't have privacy in the city. I mean,
Oh yeah. Well, what about the pop-in?
Unlock your doors.
Trainer just like opening the door.
I mean that.
Joey just walking in and drinking your mouth.
I mean, to be clear, Jerry himself did not like the pop-in. It's his friends used it.
No, I know. I saw the clip.
Yeah. So anyway.
I like the pop-in. Elaine likes the pop-in.
Yeah.
I don't like the pop-in. Kramer's a big pop-in.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Kramer's the worst.
Okay, let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah,
let's just because we're bringing it up. Or I'm bringing it up. So the pop-in is it's one of your more recent articles, Jerry's Apartment. Yeah. It's about Jerry Seinfeld and a lot of sitcoms, which I agree with. Friends, my favorite sitcom. I love that one. How I Met Your Mother, great one. They all kind of center around, for How I Met Your Mother is interesting because they have a first and a second base, they call it. First and second home, right? There's the apartment.
Yeah.
And then there's the bar that they all hang out. And same thing with the Friends, right? You had Monica's apartment and you had
Central Perk.
Central Perk. And then Jerry Seinfeld, you had Jerry's apartment.
And then Monks.
That. And I haven't really seen that show as much as the other ones. But so there is this kind of romanticization of the idea of having 1, 2, 3 spots, your work, your home, and then each one of those spots, diversity of individuals come in and out of your life at random points. And there's a lot of value in that, including people who gravitate towards you, who you might love or have mixed feelings for, like the Kramers or Newman. Yeah. Right? Newman comes into your life, but he's there, right? You're not going to get rid of him. So like if you open your life up and you're in that area, it's not like here where I don't really have a Newman out here. But I also don't have an Elaine or a Kramer.
Right.
So you don't have any of that.
Right.
So it's like an interesting, but that idea of the pop-in you were kind of talking about in that article is the idea of just, one of the reasons like you thought maybe moving here would do, you said, is there's a big community of people you've known for a long time, but because of the spatial problem, no one's just, I'm not just from 22 minutes, takes me 22 minutes to get to your house.
Right.
I'm not just like going next door on my way home.
Exactly.
It's not that's kind of the idea you were talking about.
Yeah. We have friends who live 45 minutes to an hour away, and you're not going to take a 2-hour detour to hang out for 15 minutes, right?
Yeah. So that's the problem.
Right. So the question, in the article, it was more raising the question, like, since this is such a trope of television, for shows going back, decades.
Cheers, even to some degree.
Yeah, I'm sure even some of the original, right?
Yeah, I Love Lucy.
Yeah, I mean,
sure. The neighbors popped in all the time.
It wasn't obvious to me that it's just like a land use issue. Like clearly, if you're spread out over 300 square miles, which is the size of Austin, excluding its suburbs, and we know people who live up in Leander. Yeah, that is. It's the size of New York,
and it's not even that populated.
Right? No, it's very low density. Yeah, that's part of
the problem,
and that defines the type of city you will have.
Yeah.
But we do know people who live much closer, and nobody's popping in for the most part. So it was like obviously if you live closer, it would be easier to do, but Was it ever in the culture? Was this just a made for TV thing?
Well, you said
You
like
know,
your childhood.
but in childhood, right. And then in college, of course, is like where most people experience it regularly. But even, my grandmother would pop in across the street with her neighbors. I remember, when my mom's mom would babysit us as kids, their neighbors would pop in to say hi, have a cup of coffee while we, do whatever. And so it seems like this was something that there's something there. Like people naturally will do it if it's enabled, but it seems like less so today. And I think, is that just social media, obviates the need for that sort of thing where we sort of pop into each other's feeds and, and feel like, oh, well, I caught up with, Kirk because I
You
saw his
definitely get the
Instagram.
dopamine hit that you would get if I just saw you.
Right.
Like, cause I just want to like, like that feeling you had as a kid. Where it's like,
Right.
I just want to see my friend. You don't identify it, but it just, you get a boost of dopamine.
Yeah.
When you see I remember like walking from really far away and seeing my friend down the street, even as like a 9-year-old, and you just like have a big smile on your face.
Right.
Right. And that's it. Just the image of them. Now we get that on our screen.
Right. But we're not actually building our relationship.
But
like we're not
exactly.
strengthening our relationship.
Yeah.
And this was what I was trying to get at with the pop and why it seems like it should be something valuable. It's like a low stakes interaction, Normally when we get together, it has to be planned in advance and scheduled and all of this, right? Like to do this, we had to schedule it weeks in advance, and then I had to reschedule it.
Whose fault is that?
Well, that was my fault, but
Okay.
because of car issues,
Yes, buy 2 cars, man. Yeah.
I don't want to live that kind of life,
Well,
or have the expense. It's expensive.
get like a moped or something.
Maybe, but I've seen how people drive around here, and like that just terrifies me. But
Okay.
anyway.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but continue because I wanted to say something about the pop in. But
I kind of lost my train of thought there, but
well, you're saying like it's not automatic, like it's not as natural. People don't come in randomly because we're all spaced out,
right?
So it's not having that. We don't have that expectation like we used to, and it's not built into our culture.
Oh, so I was talking about the relationship aspect of it. And so like
building
when everything is so, structured, like, oh, well, we'll have dinner in 6 weeks at this time, it just, everything then becomes an event. And instead of just kind of a relationship having a natural flow and a more, there's no regularity there, right? And so you kind of lose just you lose something. I don't know exactly what it is you lose, but the kind of
I think
interaction that makes a relationship just stronger.
I think you lose a lot.
Yeah.
No, I agree 100%. Like I'm a big relationship guy. I love relationships. I mean, I think we all do, but I've really made it a big part of my life, and I want it to be something.
Yeah. I mean, you are like a connector here.
Yeah,
in Austin,
I try really hard, and I understand how challenging it is, and not just because of the geographical thing, but because of the cultural. But one of the things I think you mentioned in that article that I think is really important for all of us to remember, and maybe this is just a byproduct of us coming out of a social media and by out of, I don't mean not using it, but just like we've now used it for 20 years heavily or 15 years. We learned some lessons. What can we do now? Is like, there's a kind of, we have this false expectation of the ease of things. And that's completely wrong. We do not think of work as like that. We know if Kirk wants to be the president of some company, he's going to work, and he's got to work his way up for year after year after year to get there. But to be a friend with you, it's like, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Right. It's like, no, it's the same thing. Like you got to work for it. Like you got to figure out how to, in this case, I want to offer my alternative for the pop in and how to make that happen in Austin. But you do have to do something. Yeah. I think the problem with the pop in and these fantasies is that it is way too reliant on just who happens to be around, who happens. So what I like about the Austin and what we have the opportunity to do is that we could be way more intentional. Yeah. Like we have the power to be way more intentional. That means, like you're saying, it's true that there is a value in the kind of randomness of it. And there's something romantic about that. But the other side of that is that, they make the Newman thing funny, but you don't want Newman in your life. No, like you don't want you really don't want those people in your life. And, they kind of make it a humorous thing, and it's like, oh, that's fun. But no, you just don't want those people in your life, and that's fine. Yeah. And so I think that's, to me, the value of building, part of what I try to do is build like a bigger tent community for all the people who have certain things. Right. And then we can have our own little communities and things like that. But my alternative to the pop-in, and I thought about this just today. I think I'm just going to do it, and I hope you'll participate. But I think I'm just going to have I'm going to steal your word, like intentional pop-in monthly. So we have the third Thursday, and I'll just, but what I'm going to do, I think, because one of the issues you and I have discussed is with the pop-in, it happens randomly and you pop into that other person's house. So if Joey comes and drinks your milk, well, you just deal with it. But like when you have like 5, 10, 15, 20 people possibly doing that, there's a big burden on the host. And unless you're like a mega millionaire, you can't just be hosting everybody all the time. Like, so I think the thing I'm going to start is like, bring a scone, pop it or something like just I might do this every Sunday at like 1:00 or something. Just come over, but if you don't bring it, you don't eat it. Right. Yeah. Like just bring it and enjoy it. And then I'll provide the grill and that's it. Yeah. And then everybody just like the same time, my house, and we could do one at your house on a different time, like once a month, someone else's house once a month. And then people have options and then we could just like go. Now the problem is you're going to deal with the Newmans a little bit. You're going to have a Newman. It's going to be really hard. I think like you could do it, but it's harder and harder, I think, to
everybody watching is
well, like I won't say who, but I heard from a friend of ours who has like a cool place. He's going to do something like that. Right. Like I think they're going to have like a separate house. I'll say like they have a separate house from their main house and they'll just have like a bi-weekly hangout at this place. And I think the more we could do that regularly, if you do it in East Austin, like I would go to yours all the time because it's a very easy drive for me actually. But the ones up in Leander, I probably won't do that as much because it's like a 40-minute drive, right?
Right.
But I'll do it occasionally because I want to see them.
Yeah.
So if it's worth it. So to me, that's the pop-in of the future is the intentional, which I know is kind of what you're trying to get away from to some degree.
Well,
you were valuing the intention out, the randomness is what you were valuing.
I think it was more about like lowering the stakes to enable greater frequency. So
the frequency is a problem.
Yeah. And so like I think that the opposite of this is what I was talking about before, the highly planned in advance,
Third Thursday.
Yeah.
And I do. That takes
but there is, I think just, the nature of modern life, like nobody really wants people randomly showing up, at their house. Most people.
In your article. I want to do it.
I mean, but like, again, like the expectation is like, it's a brief visit. It's more just, develop that friendship muscle or relationship muscle. But the intentionality, this is like in the shows you were mentioning, like they do have these third places outside of their houses where they go, and like it's a routine in their friendships. There's the bar in How I Met Your Mother. There's Central Perk where somebody's always going to be there.
Yes.
Or at Cheers, literally, where everybody knows your name.
Which I think is a good name for a bar.
Cheers, or where everybody knows your name.
Yeah, Weckin. Right? Just call it Weckin. Everybody knows your name.
But I was thinking, I don't think I included this in the article because this is this other species, I guess, of what we're talking about, just having the regularity in your relationship, but slightly more planned in the sense that you're saying every week or every 2 weeks, I'm going to be here at this time. Like when I first moved to New York, a bunch of friends from college and I all ended up roughly in Brooklyn, and like every Tuesday we would meet for dinner at this like burger place in Williamsburg back when it was affordable. And, we'd get a big table and like everybody would, whoever was around would come. And that kind of provided an early sense of like, not everybody was like as good friends with each other as they were individually. Yeah, well, no, just like, it was like people who knew people, that kind of thing. And so, but it allowed some of us to become closer friends and certainly provided that kind of relationship sinew from place, it was a weekly thing. So we were keeping up with each other's lives. And obviously, of course, that works in that situation because everybody was single and childless, but, but still like what you're saying, hey, Sunday nights or evenings, bring over the kids. We'll, just...
Yeah, for me, it would be open to kids, for sure.
And
I think you have to be, I'm almost 40. So
yeah, right.
It's like, I don't have that many friends who are not, I'm like, one of the holdouts.
But, I think it's important. And to your point, like it does take effort. I think, we've gotten used to this idea that everything should be, same day delivery. Like,
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and
Relationships are not like that.
relationships are not
Work
like
is
that.
not like
Real
that.
life is not like that. The risk reward trade-off there is like, well, if you put in no effort, if you take no risk, you are likely to not get any sort of reward.
Yeah.
So if you want strong relationships,
You got to work for it.
that, add value to your life, you have to do more than just nothing.
And the thing that I always try to help people understand is sometimes, there's two things. So I've noticed this with a lot of, I have friends who are very somewhat, not, I don't want to say antisocial exactly, but a little bit antisocial, I guess. But there's a sense where, you can really, you can have some positive inclination, some kind of, I like this person a little bit. There's going to be, but if it's like, there seems to be a threshold a lot of us have in relationships where it's like, if it's not a, what's the term? F yes, then I'm not going to do it. But it's like, that's not proper. Like one, to get to the F yes, you have to kind of really, like intimacy takes time.
Right.
And intimacy, not in terms of sex, but just in terms of closeness. Like the analogy I always use is most people treat relationships like a man standing in front of a fireplace saying, I'll give you wood when you give me fire. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. You have to put the wood in, you have to put the kerosene, and that takes time. And sometimes it's not an obvious thing. Like you have to just I have some small positive thought about this person. Let's pursue it. Now there's people that you just hate right away. There's the Newmans. And I think that's a great example. Just like, I don't even know what it is, but just Newman, right? And that's that. And okay, fine. Just don't focus on them. But anybody you have any kind of positive thing, go to dinner with them, try do things, go get coffee. Like we have to be intentional. And I think that's the message I always want to send to people about relationships. And that's why I do Third Thursday. I hope it's kind of big tense, but it can't be everything.
No.
You have to do your own thing as well. And,
but it's an opportunity to meet new people and see if you connect, with new people or people who you've seen before.
But it's only once a month.
Sure.
Like the frequency thing I think is a big deal for sure.
Right. I think
especially since we all work from home.
Absolutely. We have even fewer opportunities to leave the house and actually go out into the world now.
Yeah.
The pandemic has made a lot of us, I think, antisocial by default.
That's a good way of putting it.
And so I don't know if we have to relearn what it means to be human,
Oh yeah.
But I do think, we are a social species. We like being around other humans, which is one of the reasons cities come into existence at all, is because
even rural, like you still are in an area where you're defensible.
Sure.
Right. Like that's part of the fundamental aspect of.
Yeah. Rural is not a synonym for sociopath,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
There are, farm communities still have central points where, the general store where you come in and those were, a lot of those general stores have porches. What is a porch for? It's for socialization, right?
Yeah.
That might be the only socialization that the rancher might get. And
and the rancher would house a whole bunch of people.
Sure,
a big family. There'd be workers. There'd be all around. So you have your community right there. It's a business. Like a ranch is a business. So it's not as though. So you might have 30, 40, 50 people there. That's not. If I had 30, 40, 50 people around my house, I'd be happy with that. That's not bad. But that's
maybe you've been thinking about this all wrong. You shouldn't have bought a house in Maine. You should have bought a house way out in the hill country.
Yeah, just brought 50 people
and built a compound or something.
One day
there's some land available up in Waco.
I'm gonna leave that alone. Maybe that's my long-term play. It's be the Waco dude.
But for me, that's what the city is, right?
Yeah, so, exactly. Because you have that all around.
And the benefit of living around a bunch of strangers is that they provide all sorts of things that me and my friends ourselves cannot provide.
Exactly. Like the arts,
the restaurants,
bars, coffee shops. I miss a good coffee shop for sure. It's one of my big things. The gym. And then just the value of just seeing beautiful people.
Yeah.
I think we tend
people watching.
Yeah, people watching. That's why I like to go to Sherwood.
Yeah.
See people dressing up. But that's one thing about Maynard. Nothing wrong with Maynard. I don't mean to crud on it or whatever. But yeah, there's just the value of seeing vibrancy, people moving around, doing fun things or, exciting things. So yeah, the question is, and I want to kind of move into this, You talked about in some of your articles about this big tent philosophy and in shaping diverse and inclusive, like a kind of how to get this with all these different visions.
Right.
Californians, New Yorkers, Texans, Austinites, Republicans, Democrats, all these people. But when it comes to making the vision a reality, a vision, like you were kind of resistant to making it a Jetsons, like a specific, I want it to be this. Your vision is really taking away roadblocks that get, to use an apt term for you.
In some cases, it's, literally.
Like the obstacles that are in the way of making something that, like, making better reality.
Or removing policy that is prescriptive for a particular type of lifestyle, rather than giving developers and, people who want to then live in real estate the choice of what types of places they might like to live in. So, like, in Austin recently, we reduced minimum lot sizes required for single family homes. So it was 5,750.
And you've worked for that.
And I worked on this, yes. Yeah. And we reduced it to 1,800 square feet.
So what does that mean exactly?
So basically what it meant was that if you wanted to buy or build a single family home, you would need at least 5,750 square feet of land.
Okay. Yeah, this is 6,000, over 6,000.
Yeah, and this
is big.
That's a pretty standard suburban size lot. Yeah. But when lots downtown or close to downtown are, the price of land is very high. Yeah. And so that means the only type of house that will be built on a lot that size will be initially 5,750 square feet.
Okay.
There were some...
No, I'm sorry, but what did you get it to?
1,800 square feet.
From 5,000?
750 to, so basically cut it by a third.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm hearing something incorrectly. I apologize to you. Wait. So what was it before, and what did you get?
So the minimum lot size in Austin was 5,750 square feet.
Okay.
We have reduced it to 1,800 square feet.
So 4,000 square feet almost? Or 3,000?
Removed? Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
So
that's like 4 on here, right? Like, well, 3.5. Like, you could fit like 3 houses essentially on my lot.
Right. So we've basically, and we also did another reform earlier
good.
that would.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, it's great. So that will allow for a more, for smaller houses or houses that are closer together that don't require as much land.
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah, so it'll be like condos.
Or a townhouse or something like that. And, that is a form that people want to live in, especially if you're...
I looked for some. Yeah, I looked for some, I'll just say, I was looking in the 350, 400 range.
Yeah.
It's not a bad range for a person's first house, I think.
No, but nothing...
There was nothing in Austin.
There's nothing.
Not even like the condos were crap.
Yeah.
Or it was basically renting. You weren't even really properly owning it. It was like, I don't want to do that. Like, it was crazy. So I just went to Manor. I was like, forget it. I'll go to Manor. And I know a lot of people did that. I mean, that's why Manor's booming. Yeah. Manor has doubled in size from 10 to 20,000 in 10 years because they're being pushed out.
Right. They priced 100%. Out. So
priced out. It's like, so I get that. So that would be cool because I was, where was it? I was just there the other day. But it was like a cool little area. There's like an Alamo Draft House and like an Irish pub.
Mueller?
Yeah, thank you. Mueller.
I was just going to say this.
Yeah, and I was like, oh yeah, that's such a cool, and there's a gym right there. And, so it's like that. I would have definitely, if there was a $400,000 condo available, I would have bought. Yeah. I would have even gone to 450 if I had.
So the city redeveloped what was the Mueller Airport. So they had this huge tract of land that was municipal property, and that gave them an opportunity to kind of do something different than in the rest of the city that is zoned. Yeah. And they created this kind of, dense, largely walkable, but there's parks, there's mixed use, there's like a little sort of downtown, like my doctor is there in the Alamo Draft House. That's where we go to the movies, and it's nice, and get a drink afterwards at the pub, and it's not too far from where we live, maybe like a 10-minute Uber ride.
Yeah.
Don't drink and drive. So but it's nice, and
I used to drink
it started pretty affordable, but it's high in demand. People like to live there. So the signal there is that maybe we should build more like this. Yeah. It's fairly close to downtown. People like it. It's definitely an urban form more than a suburban form.
Yeah, it's like,
but it's still single family homes, and then in the downtown area there are apartment buildings and condos.
Well, my sense is that if we didn't have a lot of these obstacles, laws that get in the way, we don't know what exactly would be developed. It could be something really unique that we couldn't imagine.
Oh, sure.
And that's one of the, it's could be some mixed thing. Maybe it's, some super, like, cause some people, like, I'm just going to bring this up. Like, I always liked the way that Ayn Rand brought up like Monadnock Valley, and like we have like a really thoughtful architect who sees an area and is like, this is what I want to turn. To me, that's the vision. It's like, I want to see, I think Frank Lloyd Wright said something about like architect is the master art or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's true in a sense, because but architects are unfortunately so stymied in a way that like Hollywood producers and directors, they're stymied to some degree because they have such a huge budget they have to deal with. But if you're a writer of fiction, you're not, right? You're just you and the page. If you're a painter, and now in terms of being popular, that's different. But in terms of the art itself, you can do whatever you want. Yeah. A painter, the same thing. You can paint whatever you want. But even a sculptor, if you want, depending on what you're sculpting in. But an architect has so many laws that we have no idea what they could be in the vision of what the beauty of what they
I mean, listen, a developer can, an architect can come up with a plan for a community. A developer can build it. And if people don't want to live there, people won't.
Yeah.
And then they will lose money on that and go out of business perhaps, and nobody will.
Oh, yeah.
So there is that kind of contact with reality in the same way that there is with, if you write a bad novel, people won't read it, unless it's so bad. Oh, good way of thinking.
I didn't think about it that way. It's not like just because I envision it, some crazy weird thing.
But if you're only allowed to build in a certain way, if you're only allowed to build houses on 5,750 square foot lots, then you're by definition saying you can only build housing for people who can afford that.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of people who got priced out to places like Manor and Georgetown and Leander and further afield here who would have gladly opted for a house in Mueller if it were available.
100%.
But it was not allowed.
It was not allowed.
And so I'm not saying, like, I think there, if you removed all of these restrictions, there are certainly developers who would cater to a need that some people do have for a large house on a large lot. There will still be neighborhoods built like that, but it wouldn't be mandated as the starting point. It would be something that would...
I think it would definitely happen no matter what.
Yeah.
Because people value it. People want a big house for their kids.
Some people do, but then...
Well, there's enough. I think there's probably enough people who value it.
The other side of this, though, which is interesting, and talking
I guess sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
And we've been talking about the big tent here. Like, so, people get large houses when they raise kids a lot of the time, but then when they retire...
They don't want that anymore.
Right.
Yeah, empty nester.
But they want to stay in their community. And there's been nothing built or allowed to be built that makes sense for that phase of life.
Yeah.
So, like,
there are communities.
There are, but I'm saying if you want to stay in your own community, where you raised your kids, oftentimes there is not an option to downsize in a way, because the townhouse wasn't able to be built.
You're saying move somewhere nearby that's in a smaller place.
Right. Sell the house you raised your kids in and downsize oftentimes.
Yeah. So like you had an article about, what was it called? The one about Jaws, the downtown in Jaws.
Wet Hot American Suburbs.
Wet Hot American Suburbs. Great article, great titles. But the idea would be that like someone in their 30 years old, starting a family, they would buy maybe a bigger house a little bit farther away from the downtown. But then as they retire, they might buy something a little close. I'm just saying, like, as an idea.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just trying to play off.
So there's like we basically, the starter home has been made illegal in a lot of places. So like but the starter home could also be like the end of, last phase of life home too, something smaller, like not necessarily big enough to raise kids, but the type of thing that a senior citizen would also like less, many people don't want to be doing yard work, when they're old, or just don't need that much space.
I need to get into it.
It is a chore for a lot of people.
I need to get into it. But you're right. Like it's a hobby, a chore. Yeah. So I pay somebody.
But like, if it's not allowed to be built, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Yeah.
So I'm not saying what people should live in. It's not my business. But I'm saying the law should not dictate it, and the law currently does in most places, the types of housing that exists.
Even in Texas, which is
even in Texas, right? I want to say, like, let's do the full on Texas thing and let people decide for themselves.
Yeah. So going back to the "Don't California My Texas,"
right?
You're not trying to do that because California has done that.
Texans are trying to California Texas.
Yes, thank you. Have you said that before publicly?
No, but feel free to.
Yes, I think that's true. I think that I agree with that 100%. As a Californian who doesn't agree with a lot of the policies
Yeah.
of California and New York City, I think Texans are becoming more like that on their own. Like it's not the Californians. I think it's the Texans who want more restrictions, whereas the goal should be to like remove those to have more freedom.
Right.
I mean, there's a claim of freedom. I mean,
all of these Texas cities.
I have to bring this up. But did you watch the DNC at all?
I watched Kamala's acceptance speech.
I mean, because you saw like what the term they're using. So like they smartly, I think, are using freedom as their calling cry. Nothing. I had some friends at the Ayn Rand Institute who did a really good episode on this. Dr. Ben Bayer, Nikos, and they were kind of analyzing the 99-page whole thing, and they were pointing out some stuff. And it's like it's really interesting because. And I think you've talked about this in other areas about how they're in the article, I think, where you mentioned YIMBYism as a movement and urbanism and like how that looks, is that hopefully there is a place for something new. And now I think my problem right now is, I'm not advocating for either side because I can see nothing good in my view on either side really, or very little. But it's really interesting that the left is taking this freedom cry. Now what they're saying is freedom is like, some freedom and some way not freedom. It's not freedom stuff at all. But, so in this, so we're trying to figure out, okay, so that's national politics. Who the hell knows, right? Can't do anything about that. You've been always about this local politics and what can we do in Austin, Texas, right? So,
or Manor.
I want to come to Austin eventually.
Okay.
I would like to sell the house and move to Austin. That's the goal. I never wanted to like live here forever.
Yeah.
That's never been the goal, even though I like my house. Anyway, so, you have this YIMBYism, you have this the right seems to have absconded from free market capitalism, 100%. Look it up. If you don't believe me, read their platform.
Yeah.
They are not about free markets. They are not about capitalism. They're not even really about individual freedoms fundamentally. They're about social things. Now the left, I think, is, using the vernacular. I don't think they're actually about freedom. Maybe they can be. They have some freedoms. But what can we do locally, given where the things are, to me, it seems like it's still nebulous. Like, who knows where these things are going to land? Yeah. It's interesting that I've never heard Democrats cry freedom like that. Like that. Yeah, well, I've never seen it.
I do think we should welcome that,
If it's real freedom, yes. But my worry is that they're latching on to, they learned the
positive freedoms versus negative.
Yeah, they learned the wrong things so what Trump, I think, essentially, we're getting way down the leads, but I think one of the things he probably very negatively affected was, this has always been in politics, but he's just say anything to attach yourself, because he's a lifelong Democrat that's saying he's a Republican, but he's basically just been putting Republican or Democrat ideals, the negative ones, with fear and horrible fear mongering and just marketing it in this thing to reach to the worst of people. Now, I did see some positive things about the Democratic National Convention in terms of they're trying to reach to that positive center of America, which is I want to be free. And I think that's good. I'm worried about what they're trying to slip in to that. I don't know that it's real. I know that a lot of it's not freedom. Anyway, sorry, get to a question for you about how do we navigate this to build something, great here using YIMBYism. That's in my backyard, urbanism, but in the sense of freedom. Right. Because I like that they're using the term. I do like that they're using the term freedom. We just have to correct them on what it really means.
Sure. And I do think, particularly in the YIMBY movement, which, spans people across the political spectrum, people understand that largely that what is getting in the way of solving a nationwide housing shortage is largely regulation. So, people understand that there's a supply and demand issue here. Not enough supply, quite a lot of demand. And the reason the supply is not able to meet demand is because many cities or jurisdictions in general, municipalities, have made it difficult to build new housing. So So like in Austin, all of the growth is happening in the far-flung suburbs where there were not a lot of restrictions. It was very easy to build. These were like small towns for decades, and I mean almost 2 centuries in some cases, and never had to build up any kind of like state apparatus to deal with, they didn't need a massive kind of, building department or anything like that. So just easier to build. Meanwhile, Austin, on the other hand, went in a different direction and built up a massive bureaucracy to control what people could do with land everywhere. And every city did this, and every suburb has done this of the modern type. And part of this is this idea that, well, not in my backyard, but whose backyard? Mm-hmm. We're not really talking about your backyard. Yeah. We're always talking about your neighbor's backyard. And it's this desire, like in all of this stuff, it's the desire to control what other people can do.
Yeah.
And how they can live.
Freedom.
That's not freedom.
Yeah.
So the YIMBY movement is, at root, an attack on that notion that you have a right to decide how other people get to live.
Yeah.
Specifically in the area of land use. We're trying to remove the restrictions on land use that prevent different types of housing from being built, whether it's small-scale apartment buildings or duplexes or things like that. So, I mean, what was notable is that, Obama mentioned it in his speech at the DNC.
YIMBYism?
He, I don't remember the exact quote, but said we need to reduce the regulations that are preventing us from building housing. Like, that's great. Like,
that's great.
And especially his prominence in the Democratic Party, he's,
pretty much is the
that's important. That's signaling, because most of the places where the housing shortage is happening are in, blue cities.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of leaders in blue cities who are very resistant to this, or a lot of people who consider themselves progressives, but think that we can just not build our way out of this problem or something. Yeah. So I do think that kind of messaging is really important to, even if it, there's in this era of like negative polarization, Obama could say that, and then that some Republicans will just be like, well, I guess I'm anti, housing now, which is,
well, that's true that happens,
but that's not a particular.
Well, you mentioned this in your one of your articles, is that's true of like the center, the core of the Republican Party, the constituency, the core of the Democratic Party. But there's a huge swath of people that don't feel that, like myself, who don't feel like we have a political home at all. I just don't feel anywhere like not even when I was younger, it was, I could at least pretend with libertarianism. Right. And but now whenever I see Freedom Fest and all, sorry, but I was there last time and I'm like, what are they like? I have they're a bunch of anarchists. They don't stand, like, what do they stand for? A bunch of
pro-Putin anarchists.
Yeah, pro-Putin anarchists.
So
like
authoritarian anarchism.
At the Freedom Fest last year, I was like the keynote speaker. I'm like, how is that libertarian? What are you talking about? Like,
maybe it's a penchant for animal corpses.
Yeah, it was just so like, so I don't even know what to do with. I mean, they've always been, in my view, like, I don't know.
Well, it's always been. I mean, Libertarian Party has always been a big tent. I mean, the Democratic Party has been a big tent. It's like these are political parties are coalitions of people who align. The Venn diagram overlaps enough that they can call themselves like a Democrat or a Republican or a Libertarian. But
that's the job of the politician.
And right. And so, but like what the emphasis is, changes over time. And, we seem to be moving into an era, at least where the Democrats are trying to reoccupy the center, which is good. I mean, I wish the Republicans would try to reoccupy the center too. Like, and this is, where the bipartisan or the nonpartisan aspect of this, I hope, is. It's like, Americans should be for like a strong national defense and for building housing. Like, these should be non-controversial things,
Yeah, like getting to what the essence of what it should be to be an American.
Right. There should be a broad base of things that I think we agree on.
Enough people can agree.
And then
there's always going to be crazy.
Sure. And we can, but the politics can then be about the specifics, perhaps, or maybe
we're going to disagree on that,
right?
100%.
Like, I mean, I think with something like abortion, which is not really my brand talking about that, but you have two parties with very different views of that, and even now you see like Trump trying to tack to the center because something like 66% of Americans think that some form of
he cannot go like I think the one of the things I respected most about the DNC was the nod to the idea that they're going to, at least they're saying they're going to go after and making it a national issue.
Right.
Whereas because Trump is saying, no, it's going to be a state issue, do what you want.
Yeah.
But he's obviously trying to play to both sides to try to win the center.
Yeah.
And but obviously Republicans are moving more and more away from abortion rights.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, to me, that's the core issue actually. And I might move to whoever has that issue right now, which I would never think of before. But whoever has the correct issue, which is pro-abortion rights, for the record.
Yeah.
pro-abortion rights.
So I should say,
But yeah, so that's a completely different thing than this is Texans now saying, like, look at these Californians. They are trying to. I'm gonna have to cut this out. I'm not gonna cut this out. No, it's gonna stay there. But it's true.
But it is good. There were some. I think it is good for let's talk about the alternative. Not embracing freedom would be bad. So even if they don't quite have it exactly right, the fact that there is an effort being made.
Well, okay, hold on. So this is my pushback to that. So this to me, just knowing a little bit about history, this to me is like what Augustus and Caesar, when they were saying we got to harken back.
How many times a day do you think about Rome?
I am a 39-year-old white cisgendered male. I don't know. But seriously though, you saw this in England when they rebuilt the Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
When they rebuilt that in the middle of the 1800s, right? And they built it to design it like medieval structure. It's a new structure.
It's neo-Gothic.
Yeah, neo-Gothic. And the argument that the guy, I can't remember his name, the architect made. Yeah, the argument that he made was that he wanted to harken back to a better time. And this was a medieval chivalric time in England.
Right.
So the height of English values. But what I'm saying, and I see this with Rome, is there's this idea of using the rhetoric of the national values of that country to build something that is very antithetical to the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very fearful of people pulling my heartstrings for freedom in order to have a more robust, people are going to hate me for this, public education system, which I don't think we should have in the way that it is today. Obviously, I want everyone to be educated. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the way that the system, I think, is very irrational and problematic. And I don't want to, but that's what they say in their platform. Their platform is we want more of, and it's that's not freedom. It's a freedom to take more of our money to make systems that are clearly defunct in a lot of ways as an education model. So that's not freedom, but they're pulling my heartstrings to get that to happen. Or more welfare. I don't think more welfare is the answer, right? And to me, that's the problem, is what I see of that kind of rhetoric.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what they actually mean if they win and, build and...
We'll see what's in the bill when we pass it.
Well, if they, what their policy platform will be if they get that far. So, I think...
Well, they say they have a 99-page policy. I know that it's not what it's actually going to be 100%, but
yeah,
it's what we have to go off of.
I do think that visually there is something more compelling about holding up a sign that says USA rather than mass deportation now. One of those things is more American than the other, in my view. But
yeah, I agree with that. And like you said, there is something to uniting everybody under a certain banner. Yeah. What is it that unites every American on some level? We have to, so to that degree, if this is an opportunity to move the Democrats into a better place of understanding it, maybe they're just starting the process because they see it as tactically an open gap. Yeah. Then I think that's an opportunity. Like I said, I'm not opposed, for the record, I'm not opposed to voting Democrat for the first time in my life, essentially. I'm definitely not.
It's the first time for everything.
Yeah. Well, I haven't even been voting the last couple times because I'm so depressed. I could not vote in 2016 for either of those candidates. I just could not vote for them. Now, locally, I'm voting more because basically I'm listening to you and
that's good.
Helping you.
Because
I'm for the record, I'm ignorant about a lot of practical politics. I think I have a philosophical, cultural perspective, so I'm not advocating for anything.
Yeah, and I definitely operate more where in the practice of politics too, and trying to understand what it is that can get done and how to actually do something, how to get good stuff done. And so, with a lot of these issues, we're a nation of 330 million people. Everybody has the things that they care about the most. I care about cities and I care about what makes them thrive. And I focused on housing.
That's your deep value, yeah.
Because a city that can't house people is a city that just can't thrive.
No, I know. We need to get behind that.
Yeah, but there's, plenty of other issues that I have opinions about and that I do care about. But, in order to be effective on any one issue, you kind of have to focus.
At least for now.
Sure. I would say as an activist, right? And not as a politician,
As a politician, you have to have views on everything.
Right. And so, I'm not trying to run for office. I don't think anybody will vote for me after this podcast.
I don't know, in Austin.
I'm just kidding. But, trying to be an effective advocate for, land use reform. And so, I was appointed to the zoning commission and, we're trying to make good things happen there. So, yeah. But anyway, I think, my general advice to people, is pay less attention to national politics. I think if you want better national politics, you have to get better local politics first. Mm-hmm. You will not believe that we can have positive change at the national level unless you see it with your own eyes at the local level. And Absolutely. That means, I don't think people have to get involved in politics per se, but find something in your community that you care about, try to meet other people, make a difference in whatever way it is. It could be a neighborhood park cleanup or something like that, but find a connection to the place in which you live and do something.
That's why because of you, I think that was one of the tipping points for me to really push to join the board of Austin Shakespeare.
Yeah, right. So you love the arts.
I love the arts. I love theater, and I want to see more of it.
Yeah.
So I want to help with the building of and making it bigger.
Yeah, I think
and education has a connection to both. So
yeah, this stuff doesn't happen automatically. All of the stuff that we enjoy,
someone has to do it.
Somebody has to do it, and so somebody has to step up. If you enjoy, it's if you enjoy this thing, support it in some way. Sometimes, I get it. You're busy with a job, raising kids, whatever. Not but sometimes your support can only be financial, but sometimes it could be patronage.
You
just
always support your values.
Showing up, right? Pay for the ticket, go donate to their annual appeal, whatever, promote it on social media or whatever. You don't have to go join the board.
More of a culture like that.
I agree. And I occasionally write about this and I think about it a lot, just the kind of decline in, civic culture in general and all of the participatory organizations that used to proliferate across America, like the Elks Club, League of Women Voters, things like that.
Start an Elks Club again?
Not necessarily, but these kidding, things were.
No, I agree. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just being a little.
Yeah, but these were places where people came together outside of work and met people across different, socioeconomic lines, different
small
careers.
Business alliances.
Yeah, but there were ways for people to get involved, and those organizations always, they'd march in the 4th of July parade, but then they'd, it'd be the Kiwanis clubs, annual fundraiser for some cause.
My dad was a part of all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think that was way more a part of life. I think we rely too much on social media, like we were saying earlier, for all that.
Right.
That hit. And we forget that social media is just a tool. It's not life itself.
Yeah,
it's not a replacement for life.
Exactly.
So I like social media. I think it's a great thing. But yeah, we have to start being adults, right? Our millennials that start getting into the world and encourage other people to do the same.
IRL, in real life, that's, and everything, that I'm interested in, what I write about, the advocacy work that I do, it's trying to make cities places that people want to be in real life in again,
Well,
and
I think it already is like that a little bit.
It
you
is.
just need to actually do it, but it could be better.
When you create places that people want to be in, people go there, up in Mueller, Mueller's downtown. It's always busy,
just go to Mueller downtown and read a book and meet someone.
But Austin downtown, at night, people come out. I was in New York City for 9 days, and people were everywhere. People like cities. People want to be there. It wasn't just tourists.
Yeah, no. There's a whole vibrancy to Austin as it is now. This is why I'm bullish on Austin. Is I think it's a great place where you can build what you want if you're intentional. But if you're just sitting at home in your room, it's not going to happen. So I hope part of the message here is what you have done and what you've inspired me to do in terms of getting involved is build the values you want, build the community you want.
Yeah.
My criticism of, I'll just end with this, I guess, and I want to ask you some quotes, just some rapid fire quotes. But one of my, and if you have any other thoughts too, but one of my, things about New York and California is that, especially New York, is in a sense, it's so vibrant, it's so beautiful, I love it. But there is a sense of like, it's really difficult, even if it were more free, to build stuff there because it's so popular.
Yeah.
It's so over, like all the stuff is already done. It's almost like going to visit, an old European Gothic, like this is, oh wow, this is really interesting. Now I want to build my own thing. Like go and, what's the Westerner poem, like live new rock and, like build and live, like that's what Austin is to me. Austin is an ability where we can get together with Texans and Californians and New Yorkers, just Austinites, come together and build something that Ryan likes, that I like, that everybody, likes in their own little areas. And there's plenty of opportunities to be able to do that here if we work at it. And there's air conditioning, so let's quit talking about the heat.
And water.
And there's plenty of water and air conditioning. We wear our shorts.
Yeah.
That's an Austin thing to do versus
this is an Austin tuxedo right here.
This is suiting up with Barney Stinson.
Yeah.
Like, hey ladies, how you doing? And this one. Okay, you ready you have any last thoughts before we go into some quotes?
No, I mean, I think that's right. New York is an old city. It's almost 400 years old. A lot of the problems with New York are rebuilding it for the modern era. It's got the subway turns 120 years old this year. So, and a lot of its infrastructure is 120 years old. So like part of it is, the difficulty in building new is that you have to maintain and rebuild the old too. Yeah. And so Austin being a relatively, it's almost 200 years old, but the modern version it was so small for so long. So really, we're really at the cusp of building a modern Austin. And there's, so that's an exciting time to be here as it grows into, I think, what could be a modern greater city. So,
and if you haven't heard about it, go to the Ayn Rand Institute and check out the museum we're building. Because I'm actually very excited about being a part of building an actual building.
Yeah.
Here in this
something
area.
that will
really
be
exciting.
on the landscape.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, ready for some quotes?
Sure.
Some just kind of rapid fire on top of your head, and I might comment with you. Okay, so you brought up Thomas Jefferson. So I think you kind of already mentioned this one, but I thought this is an interesting one. I view great cities as pestilential to the morals, the health, and the liberties of man.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
100% disagree. I think I quoted that in my article, Revolt of the Cities.
Yeah,
or one of them. But, my comment on that, and listen, the words that Jefferson wrote often, he failed to live up to the words that he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say, well, if that's his view, of cities, well, he should, peek out the window of Monticello and tell me.
In 1700. Slaves.
What do you see there?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think so he says, I view great cities as pestilential to the morals, the health, and I do so I agree with you 100%. I will say that I do think there's some challenges with the liberties part in big cities. There is something about the bigness that seems to have always lent itself over time to eventually encroaching on the liberties. Like this happened in Athens, this happened in Rome. There seems to be a tipping point of size where there's so many diversity of voices that there's such a power that overcomes everything that it just, I don't know if it has to happen that way, but it seems to have happened every single time. There's a size thing where it's like there's something that goes wrong. Like there's that line, weak men create hard times, hard times create strong men create good times, something like that. But I think the idea behind it, and that's from a famous historian. What's his name? Hang on, I'm forgetting the name. Anyway, but the sentiment I think is simply that there seems to be something along the lines of we get to this size ease that we let everything crumble because nature and human nature and existence requires constant growth and progress and building. And we get to a point so New York City is at a point like that maybe where it's hard to see how it would really restructure into something new.
Yeah, I guess I
don't know. I'm just trying to sympathize.
I don't see it hard. That was the sort of theme of my piece yesterday, Pretend It's a City, is that, you can see what it needs to do. London is a 2,000-year-old city that, is still a highly desirable, one of the, the global, cities. It's an amazing place. So I don't think necessarily they always break. New York is 400 years old, and at the point now where it has a lot of old stuff. It has made it harder for it to adapt by covering, huge portions of the city in historic districts. So that natural evolution that is necessary to a city has not been able to happen. So again, it's like land use restrictions here. If you don't let a city evolve, it won't evolve.
Yeah.
So, so that's essential. Like in order, when we impose these sort of arbitrary limits on how things can happen or what you can do, you kill a certain aspect of what makes a city vital. So.
Yeah. And I, like I said, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate and kind of think through what he was.
Yeah.
I think it's just an interesting observation about what happens. And again, the story of the woman getting murdered is always an example.
But that's an anecdote, right? Like people.
But it's an anecdote of a callousness about the people around.
Sure. And how many times does this happen on the highway too, though, where people just assume that the guy behind them called 911?
Yeah.
So
it happens everywhere.
Right. You can nutpick anything.
Yeah.
Instead of nitpick, you pick like the crazy example to try to, make a broader point, but I don't know.
No, I get it. That's
I think,
No, it happens everywhere.
Right. But there's a reason people go to cities because they are, in a certain sense, a certain social sense, much freer than somewhat small town suburban environments.
Yeah.
Like all of the music from the 80s is about how all these people were being stifled by suburban conformity,
Yeah.
Like that is a trope too in film, especially, like Revolutionary Road or I don't know.
Oh, well, like you use the term I like, laced curtain prisons for women.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So
it's like your places in the house, you stay there. I mean, what kind of a hell is that?
Right.
If you want that,
domestic bliss, right?
Yeah, but it's like, I think there's a reason why there was so much drinking and
right.
And they depict that well. I think like in Queen's Gambit, you see that a lot.
I mean,
and I thought that was a good, but because people are miserable and they're not
Right.
actually madmen, has that kind of view.
The fentanyl crisis isn't something that's only happening in cities. It's also happening out in our suburbs and in our rural areas too.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway,
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. So, okay. But if you really want to be yourself, go to a place where there's a million other people trying to be themselves, because nobody cares about your particular version of it if you're minding your own business.
For sure. Yeah. Okay, real quick. So Frank Lloyd Wright, I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to read the whole quote and see just your thoughts. The mother art is architecture. Without an architecture of our own, we have no soul of our own civilization.
Yeah, I like that. I do think that architecture, one just has the power to inspire. It is itself a physical manifestation of the values of any place and time. When we choose to build beautiful, that says something, I think, about who we are and what we want, or what we think people want as well. Yeah.
Okay, last one. Just one.
Oh, what did
Actually,
I
two more. We'll do two
yeah, I
more
wanted to
quick
say
ones.
that the built environment, though, is directly related, and the architects design the built environment. So how we interact with each other, these nodes of connection and whatnot, are in some sense shaped and defined by how it is designed and built. So if you create a place that is alienating, people will be alienated from each other. If you create places, where people can gather and come together, people will gather and come together.
Yeah. Well, then that's great for my next quote. I'll do two more real quick. It was Winston Churchill. We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. So that's kind of what you were just saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's right. The physical form has an impact on how we live. If we build a room with no windows, we will be forever in the dark.
Is that a Ryanism?
I think so. I don't know.
I like it.
But, just if we build, I think about some buildings downtown that have no street level interaction. The building itself has turned away from the street. It's saying, don't come in here. And it's sort of hostile. You don't also want to walk around it. I'm thinking of the Hobby building, which is now falling apart and, slated to be demolished and turned into something hopefully more engaged with the city around it. Yeah, a building can either enhance the city that it's in or detract from it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I agree. You
don't have to agree.
What's that?
You don't have to agree.
Okay, I don't agree. I agree. No, I think we're on the same page on a lot of things, except for cars and public transportation. But I want my motorcycle, man. Just me in the open road. I'm all about that. I love it.
But wouldn't it be better for your motorcycle if you weren't hemmed in on four sides by giant vehicles that couldn't see you? Like, I actually think the motorcycle is a good, or you see this a lot in, Asian countries where like the moped is a pretty common thing. And like mopeds are great for human-sized streets, streets that are not given over entirely to the cars. They're more nimble. You can get around,
Yeah. I mean, in California, they have lane splitting as legal. So
Sure. But all of California was built for the car. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we could go off forever, but I think there's an interesting conversation we could have just about cars and the history of cars. But yeah, I agree that there'd be, having a different view or, different way that it laid out would be interesting. It seems that it developed this way for cultural reasons as well as the government fueling it maybe less than it should. I mean, to me, the analogy is trains.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think trains would have happened without the government going in transcontinental.
Right.
J.J. Hill was a great example of, he would build a road or build a rail, and then he'd build a city a little town at the end, and that's how it would grow. It would have taken longer because they didn't just aggregate and take everyone's money and then put it into this, whether they used it or not. All these people were paying for it who didn't use it. But I think it would have happened eventually, just would have taken long. So I suspect we would have been a more car culture anyway. Maybe it would have looked a lot different, I agree, because maybe we would have had more little towns along the way for motorcycles going or whatever. But who knows?
The freeways didn't have to go through the downtown of every city. They could have stopped and turned into smaller roads instead of, like somebody made a choice, and often that choice was driven by, racism to bulldoze huge sections of cities, right?
Yeah, that's a bad thing.
And then we did that. We destroyed communities, and then the areas next to the highways became blighted because cars are noisy.
Yeah.
And so the pattern of urban highway development was to destroy land value, to destroy communities, and then to destroy adjacent land value. And that made the cities less desirable, and people, it was a road to get out as much as a road to get in. And so we took all of our vibrant cities in America, many of our vibrant cities, did this. We built roads into their centers and turned them into places where people only worked and not where people lived, and sort of drained them of their life. People stopped shopping there eventually too. All the stores moved out to the suburbs.
Department stores and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the pattern with many Midwestern cities.
I mean, I think you and I are on the 100% same page where I don't see it. I mean, one of the problems with having a government-led procedure of these kinds of big-scale projects or even small-scale projects is that it's going to be based on the presumed values of that era.
Right.
And so, we think of ourselves as necessarily enlightened and better now. I don't know that that's always true. Like, I wouldn't trust anybody, left, right, center, libertarian, to rewrite the Constitution right now.
Yeah.
Like, if they put a caucus together or whatever, a group to do that, it's like, it would be an utter disaster, and it would be the worst thing ever. So, but what I'm saying is, so you're right. The fact that there were these things, that they had these values, there were these racist, sexist ideologies that were dominant in the culture. It was a predominantly, white centric viewpoint. We want cars. Yeah. We all love cars. Who doesn't love cars? Get rid of this neighborhood because it's not as valuable as. I agree, and I think that would happen in a different way. It wouldn't look like that. It looks if we did that today.
Yeah, I mean,
we both agree.
The technology of the car is incredibly appealing. It obviously, allowed for people to move around the Earth in a different way, but we didn't have to then say that the purpose of government is to pay for
exactly for that
this vehicle to then go everywhere it wants to go. But I do think the other aspect of it, while to your point, reflecting the values of the time, well, one of the values was that eminent domain, which is basically
it's theft.
Right, it's an abuse of property rights. Was considered and still is a essential tool of government, and it was used to build the highways in the name of progress. And so I resist when people talk about the great technology of the car. It's like, yes, but eminent domain abuse, property rights abuse does not that's a regression in a certain sense.
100%.
So,
but that's not what I'm arguing.
no, I
obviously.
know,
Yeah.
but I think
I
this,
think
this
it
is
would
often
happen.
dropped because there are people in the progress community who will, say, oh, you're being anti-progress here. And I'm like, well, I don't like the history of progress is an expansion of individual rights, not
It
going
should
back.
be that.
Right.
But that goes back to what I was saying about pulling the heartstrings by using a rhetoric, but actually slipping in really anti-regressive ideas.
I agree. And
that's what I'm worried about. And
yeah,
so, in terms of certain things.
For sure.
So, because I 100% agree, like I want us as individuals to figure it out and to build stuff, try things, fail, try again, get people to like it, don't like it. Come to Third Thursday, don't come to Third Thursday. Things like that. Like I want people to try stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'm all for that.
Yeah. So, right. But without that power, the roads would have been built in a different way. The highways would have been built in a different way.
It would be completely different. It'd probably be better.
Yeah. Well, we wouldn't have destroyed the livelihoods and wealth of,
whole
hundreds of thousands of Black and immigrant communities that lived in cities.
Yeah.
Depriving them of the ability to build wealth. We wouldn't have created the inner city as a concept.
Yeah.
Of decadence and decay, and
we'd have something else, but probably better.
I think we would have stronger cities that I think yes, for sure, people still would have opted into a more modern suburban style of living if they could, but there would be more options for families in cities too who didn't want that. So,
just real quick, we'll end on this. I started watching this show, and if you haven't seen it, then this is a bunk question. I apologize, but
we can cut it.
For All Mankind.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, we love I love it.
I thought the way they approached the idea of progress in technological terms as pushing the way to social progress was wonderful.
Yeah.
And because the premise is, what if the Soviets landed on the moon first and the Cold War was essentially not a Cold War of weapons building and arms race, but a technological race into space. I thought that, I'm really in love with this show. I think it's so amazing because it puts this idea of now we're competing with them for these things that aren't about blowing people up.
Right.
It's about who can get to Mars faster. Who can put the woman on the moon faster.
All right. There's a Mars colony in the 90s on this show, I believe. So.
Yeah. Wait, I haven't gotten there.
Oh, never mind.
I'm in the 80s.
Spoiler alert.
But I figured there'd be one by now. But yeah. Anyway,
there's a moon base.
Yeah. So I'm in the moon base phase still. But yeah, the point is that it's I ruined it for other people. Sorry, spoilers. But I like that approach of the progress. Now, the interesting thing is it is a government-led thing, right? So that's different than what we're saying. But it becomes government, public or government individual. Boeing gets involved, things like that. So anyway, I just like that approach of having a positive progressive value we're trying to go after,
right.
And how that having real vision in a let's make humanity better by doing something epic, go to Mars and colonize the world, the universe, that inevitably has to it forces you to not be sexist because if you're in a race, you have to have the best people, and it's not just white men who chain smoke. There's some of the best, but they're not the only best.
There's that interesting tension in the show where the Soviets basically try to one up the United States on its, quote unquote progressive values. Yeah. And so the Soviets, put a woman into space first. And so that forces this kind of reckoning with,
what their actual
with American ideals, right?
Yeah, and that I like that tension in the show of is that anyway. I just thought that was interesting about the roads. If there is something about let's have Austin be that progressive place and not the calm down Texans. I just mean building something nice, pro progress, pro building. Let's make the best city the planet's ever known. And in doing that, maybe we'll all be a little better.
Here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any last words, Ryan?
Well, thanks for having me. This has been a fun conversation, as usual.
All right, I'm ready for my pop-in.
Us too.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Kirk.